Welcome to the Boundless Freedoms TV show. I'm your host, Deborah Chelette-Wilson, and I'm excited today to visit with my friend and confidant and partner in crime. We're going to be doing some cool things we'll tell you about a little later. Anne Redelfs. Did I get it right? Or close?
Well, every member of the family pronounces it a little differently, so you're in there with some members.
I'm in the ballpark.
That's how I say it.
Well, great. Well, on our Boundless Freedom show, the purpose of it is to find out how people are finding freedom in their own lives, and because we have many, many pathways to get there, and so everyone has their pathway of how they've gotten to where they are today, and the wisdom that they've gathered along those lines. So I would like to introduce my friend again, Anne, and she is a retired psychiatrist, a public speaker, and the author of 3 incredible books: The Awakening Storm, Illness Can Be the Cure, and With Every Addiction, Infants Are Trying to Meet Their Needs. She calls herself a listener in that she's able to hear the soul of a person and what it needs in order to move forward in its development. So welcome to the show, Anne. And would you start off by telling us just a little bit about yourself and how the path that led you to becoming a soul listener? That's very interesting.
Well, I grew up in an extremely dysfunctional home. My dad was a psychopath, and my mom was like a Stepford wife, if you've seen the movie where wives are programmed to serve their husbands, and rather than meeting human developmental needs, which would have been the mature stance. So I remember once going out into the porch where my parents were, telling them that the kitchen was on fire. And my voice got louder and louder. The kitchen's on fire. The kitchen's on fire. And as my voice got louder, I was screaming before they heard me. Oh, and they went in, and of course the kitchen was on fire, and they took care of it. But I was not heard. And so it became important to me to learn to listen and find out why this is so hard for people to do. And what I learned is I was not the only one screaming to be heard. Not everyone uses their voices. Some people scream through their body symptoms. Some people scream through their behavior. But when we're not heard at a deep soul level, we start screaming. And so many things that are going on in our society are just children screaming to be heard and screaming to be responded to in a mature way.
So in your own experience, your child developmental legitimate needs were not met. And you've discovered that
Absolutely.
That not only was true for you, but for many, many other people or in their own experience. The bottom line is...
Yes, I could not.
Yeah, the bottom line is that the needs weren't met.
Yes, I could not grow up in that sort of traumatic household. I remained very, very young psychologically, and it was only after I left home that I began to develop as a heart and mind, as a human. And why this is important is because I was an adult going through this developmental experience, I was observing, I was aware, I was taking notes. And so I've developed a whole new system of human psychological development as a result of this experience. So my methods are different than mainstream because so many people study books, they go to classes. My information is based on a lot of personal experience.
Mm-hmm. And how did that connect with your own education as a psychiatrist? Did those clash? Did they merge? Were you able to integrate them? What was your experience?
Well, I went through 2 years of pediatric residency before I went through my psychiatry residency. And that made me different again from all my colleagues because in pediatrics, we're looking at human development, physically, the physical development, and also milestones as far as your 5-year-old, is he tying his shoes and the things that he should be doing. So it was a whole different mindset than my colleagues who were taught about disorders. So when I saw a patient, for example, who wasn't putting together, like tying your shoes, putting things together like he should be, I'm thinking, okay, he's stuck at a younger stage of development. So my mind was seeing people as where they are stuck compared to what disorder they might be having.
Okay, so your approach,
totally different.
Yeah, your approach was more human developmental than disorder.
Yes. And I found that people were telling their stories in what they were acting out, whether with their psychiatric symptoms or physical symptoms. For example, one person had horrible scars down his back on physical examination. He was coming into the hospital and, wow, what happened here? And he said, oh, well, that's where my dad beat me when I was bad. So found out his dad's name was Theodore, and his delusion was that a giant teddy bear was trying to kill him. So it made sense that people's symptoms were actually telling their story of what happened. Another person, every time she had a psychotic episode, she went to the library and read every book she could on incest. So where my colleagues were diagnosing and treating these things with medication, and there's a time and place for that, I don't have a problem, but if that's the only thing to do, we're missing that human voice that says, hey, this happened to me. I never worked it through. I need help. I need a mature human being to walk me through the steps, hold my hand, so I can work this through.
So you've come to view the symptoms as really like the tip of, let's say, the iceberg of humanity. And what's driving that behavior is really, of course, the bigger part of the iceberg is like underneath the water. And so that's kind of where you see the lack of developmental needs that were met, experiences that people had are actually driving their behavior. And that's really where we need to journey and help them come out of that. And that's kind
absolutely.
Okay, and that's what you see as missing.
Exactly, and this is where human development comes in again. For example, if our professionals, for example, are stuck in infancy, infants just see very, very superficially. They don't have the ability to look behind the scenes of what's driving that. And so they're seeing just the tip of the iceberg. And if 90% or so of the iceberg's under the water or in the unconscious, where so much of ourselves can be and so much of our lives can be, they cannot see it. So development is huge. It is so important that we pursue it because our very perceptions are distorted by our stage of development.
Right, because perception.
Not to mention our feelings, our thoughts, our behaviors, everything. So that's my soapbox, human development.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. So in a way, it sounds kind of real serious and scary, but actually to me, it sounds, what you're saying sounds so hopeful because this is a whole big area that isn't being addressed. And from your experience, and actually from my experience as a therapist as well, when we help meet those developmental needs, people shift and change and transform. So they can actually transform their traumas that's underneath the iceberg, the bigger part, into triumphs and come out of a lot of things where we think they're stuck and lost forever. So to me, that sounds so hopeful and exciting.
It is. And if you could imagine someone going to a doctor, what I used to be, and instead of, this is an 18-year-old white female presenting with da-da-da-da-da, this is a person who's physically 18, emotionally 12, mentally 6, that whole range of information rather than just the physical being. How transformative that would be, because we could be working on the whole person instead of just what is going on at the tip of the iceberg, the physical body. There's so much hope there, and how our lives would improve if we were addressing the whole person instead of just the physical being.
So how do you see some other examples of how this lack of growth and development manifests in people's behaviors and in other ways that are contributing to some of the difficulties that we are seeing in our culture?
I see it every time I open a newspaper, for example. Infants again, and I bring up infancy because it's one of my field of specialties, psychological infancy. Infants are greedy and they're needy. And so when you have someone who so often they're just doing things for money, no care for human beings or what effect their choices make. It's just, it was cheaper, so we did it that way. That's infancy. And infants milk anywhere they can, meaning that they use and abuse their position to personally profit. And these people are all over the news, but we're not seeing them for what they are. People stuck in psychological infancy that need help. We're seeing their positions. Oh, they're head of the company or head of this government position. And wow, their voice is expressing itself in a big way with populations. And we're not hearing and responding to that ultimate soul need of help. I'm stuck at a very young age. And recreating trauma.
Right. So
that's the thing about younger stages of development, recreate their traumas wherever they go, because they don't have the ability to say, this is what I went through and I've never gotten over it. Would you help me, Deborah? They don't have that voice. They just have the screaming of behavior that's ultimately asking for help at a soul level.
So where does personal responsibility come in with your model?
Well, again, personal responsibility comes with maturation. And people that are stuck in infancy, for example, it's just like a baby. They don't have that ability. They will never say, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I know I hurt you. Please forgive me. They don't have that level of consciousness. What they do, they see you reacting to, and they think you are reactionary. What's wrong with you? They don't see what they've done to cause you to be that way. For example, a typical infant will just automatically recreate their traumas, say to you what was said to them, and if they're stuck in infancy, it was probably something horrible. But they see you reacting, and so your anger at what they just said is really their own, because they're recreating their experiences. They have put that stuff, all that painful stuff in their unconscious mind, the lower part of the iceberg. And so you end up showing them what their real feelings are. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So how,
if you're
but how are we going to get, how are we going to get, I guess, people to understand that so they're not reacting, that they kind of see this in people and be able to respond, I guess, and watch out for people from where they're coming from.
Well, this is where education comes in, and what I'm teaching I have a new website now. It hasn't been put on yet, but it's just about to be, where if people know where you are in development, have that educational tool, they can give you what you need to progress. For example, if someone's stuck in infancy and they have no ability to see their own behavior, they just see your reaction to it, then your job is to help them make the step. Well, do you remember what you just said to me? They may not, or they may think they said something just not very nice, or it's no big deal what they said. And then say, well, this is how I heard it. Can you see? And help them make that step. And at the first, no, they're not going to see. They think it's all you. But you have to help them with that other perspective. The more mature we are, the more we can have many, many perspectives. I see what I see. I can see what you see. I can see what lots of people see. But the younger we are, no, my perspective is what's right.
Okay.
So help people make that developmental step of, yes, there's a rightness to your perspective maybe, and there's maybe a rightness to mine, and there's a rightness to a lot of people's perspectives, and let's look at all of that rather than my way. The younger we are, it's my way. And if it were that their way, it might be okay, but it isn't. It's the way that they learn from all their trauma, which is recreating their trauma or avoiding the trauma, the two stances of post-traumatic stress. So they're basically on automatic pilot, doing unto others what was done to them.
And then not aware of it.
Exactly. Yeah, lack of awareness is one of the key characteristics of psychological infancy.
Mm-hmm. And so there's a lack of awareness. I'm hearing in what you're saying, there's a lack of awareness if you have trauma, but then there's also a lack of awareness of how that's manifesting in people who maybe haven't had trauma, which that's kind of hard to think of in this society.
Never met anyone like that. Have you?
What?
I've never met anyone who hasn't had trauma. Have you?
Actually, I haven't either. So it's, so it's like, again, that gives so much hope that there's so much more that we can do as individuals to take personal responsibility for our own growth and development, and then be able to recognize where other people are so we can either help them or get away from them, depending on what the situation is. Because maybe sometimes you need somewhere.
Some people stuck in infancy are truly dangerous, and we have to be able to see that danger below the iceberg to know to get away and to get our children away, because that top of the iceberg can seem very nice sometimes, but underneath there's real danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
the problem has gotten so bad that there aren't enough effective therapists in the world to handle just how many people are stuck at a young age and are acting out in a dangerous manner. So the more of us know about this, that can help the people, at least in our own lives. And like you said, ourselves, that's key.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes me think about, how women have been enculturated to always be nice, to be kind, and to take care and meet people's needs. So it sounds like that could become detrimental when you meet with a person who may be wonderfully engaging at first, but have this underneath the iceberg stuck place that you don't realize until maybe later on. And then your own culture can work against you to keep you stuck in that relationship.
Yes, so often you have the nice person married to someone who's really awful. And in therapy, the nice person comes to know that that awful person is part of their iceberg somewhere, someone from their past that they didn't realize had abused them and imprinted on them. So it's in there somewhere. So whenever I'm working with people, I'm always, okay, whatever is out there, how could it be mirroring something in the deeper layers of your iceberg? Mm-hmm. And making that conscious. Because one of the few defenses an infant has is closing the eyes and turning the head. So when we're not looking at something, we're not seeing it, when we're denying it, that's that infant part of us. And why is that infant part coming out in regard to whatever the situation is? There's something there to explore.
Yes. What is your website? I know you said it wasn't going to be, it's not up yet, but if, when people can go to that, where would they need to go to find out more about the work that you're doing and educating people and helping us to become more aware, not only of others, but also of ourselves and our own personal growth and development to becoming more mature and soulful beings?
My website is annethelistener.com. And when the old site's still there, but when the new site comes up, it's going to have a questionnaire to fill out to find out where you are in your development. And this is really key information because so many people, they look at their physical bodies and they say, I'm a mature adult. Mm-hmm. But this quiz is going to get people aware of where they are emotionally, where they are mentally, and then ultimately what they can do to progress.
Right, because it sounds like there's lots of tools and things that you've put together that can help people move forward in their lives instead of staying stuck.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And you mentioned how when women can say nice things all the time and get stuck in the nice role. I was once at jury duty, and that came up in conversation. All of our mothers were saying awful things. And we were saying, wow, isn't this interesting? And they were all in their later years. And what we realized is that because women were trained to be that way in older generations, they come a point where all that negativity that they've been holding inside comes gushing forward. That's development, going from one extreme to the other extreme, and then hopefully balancing out in between.
Oh, that's cool. Now, what is coming up in the next few months of, what are you, I think you're good. Well, you and I are going to be doing some things together. But you want to share that with our audience?
We will be doing a webinar on February 17th, which is called Under the Iceberg of Addiction. And I'm really excited about it because we're going to be talking about some of these things that are in the unconscious of us all and how to bring them up and heal them, specifically relating to addiction, which I believe we all have addictive tendencies. To me, that's the inner infant that clings to something other than what actually meets our human needs, clings to something we learned. And so it'll be a good way to become conscious of some of these iceberg parts of ourselves.
Okay.
I also have a talk show coming up in May where I'm going to be talking about trauma and helping people to see trauma in their own lives. There are so many traumatized people in our country, but we're calling it something else. Oh, that's just her personality, or he has a genetic mental illness, or whatever, other than this is a person who's traumatized, stuck in their development somewhere, and needs help to get unstuck and progress in their maturation.
So there is such a thing as post-traumatic growth.
Yes. Hey, what a great term. I think you should write a paper on that, Deborah. That's excellent.
Well, hope is important. And, from what I've experienced and what I'm hearing you've experienced, that there's a lot of hope out there. It's just that people don't have access in this information age. It's incredible that people don't have access to all this information that's been bubbling up probably for the last 50 years. And it's just such a growing body of information of how the research is teaching us about development and the brain and the nervous system and the heart and the soul of who we are. I mean, it's really about, I think, restoring our story of what it is to be a human being beyond this stuck place where we get to a certain place and we can't go any further. It just never did work for me. That we have the capacity and the ability to grow lifelong, and used to, I would say we need the willingness, but now I'm like, I think we need the information, because what I find is when I share what I share with people, they have the willingness. They just didn't know there was another option than staying stuck and being sick. So,
Wow.
You're offering people another option besides dis-ease in their lives. And that's pretty incredible. So that's so exciting.
It is. And one reason I put my devastating past forward as well is I feel like with that, people can know, well, you can get out of anything. You truly can get out of it. If I can, anybody can. Because we're all pretty much made the same. To me, we're all children of God. And once we really get that, we truly can do anything.
Well, thank you so much for being on my show today. I look forward on us doing our webinar together. And then also we're going to be doing a talk in Plano, Texas. Is that on
the 25th?
On the 25th of February. Okay, February is going to be a busy month. And what's
that's at the Unity Spiritual Center in Satcha, Texas. I don't know how to pronounce it. SACHSE.
Okay, and we'll be putting more information out that for people so they can be on the lookout for your website, the webinar, and then the program at the Unity Church. So thank you so much for being here today. And I look forward to having you on another time to share more about
Thanks,
your
Deb.
work and what you're doing and how you're making a difference in the lives of people to move them forward, to help them grow and develop and change their lives, and not only their lives but the lives of their family, and they can change, and actually that's changing and transforming the trajectory of their inter-family legacy. That's pretty big stuff. So thanks a lot, Anne. Bye-bye.
Thank you.